this trip to the lake, Diane and Daniel brought along their 2 children like usual, Brian, who was 5 years old, and Aaron, who was 2 years old. They also brought along 3 of their nieces, Emma, who was 9, Allison, who was 7, and Kate, who was 5. These stopping to eat and loading the kids back into the minivan, Diane stopped at a Sunoco gas station. There, she filled up on gas, and then she left the kids inside the minivan while she went into the convenience store. Once inside, Diane had a quick look around, and she spoke to the clerk briefly. I believe she asked if they had any over-the-counter pain medication available. They did not sell any at this gas station, and Diane left. The clerk noted that Diane seemed in a perfectly normal mood. Diane went and got back into the minivan and then left Aunt's phone from her Aunt Diane's phone. At this point, the minivan was stopped once again on the side of the road, but in a different area. It was a pull-off area located just after a toll booth on the Tappan Zee Bridge. This spot is just north of New York City and about an hour away from their home in West Babylon. Emma stated to her father, "There's something wrong with Aunt Diane." And this is actually the name of a documentary on HBO about this case, and I would highly recommend going out there to watch it. It's very fascinating and gives a lot more detail into this case than I can cover here. But she said there's something wrong with Aunt Diane. She even said that Aunt Diane was having trouble seeing and that she sounded funny. Warren asked for Emma to put Aunt Diane on the phone so he could speak to her. Emma did, and after talking to Diane, Warren knew that something was very wrong. In the background, he could hear some of the other kids basically screaming and crying, and something seemed off with how Diane was speaking. She really wasn't making sense. Now, I'm not sure specifically what she said, but apparently it was very confusing to Warren. Diane then told her brother Warren that something was wrong as well. She said she wasn't able to see and seemed to just be out of it, as she claimed. Warren asked Diane to stay put, and it's unclear if he knew where Diane was located at this point or if she was just had no idea and they were going to go find her regardless. But at some point their call was disconnected. I'm not sure if she hung up on him or it naturally just the call dropped. But after that, Warren and Jackie did call 911 as they were concerned for the safety of their kids. They had tried to get back in touch with Diane at several times, and none of those seemed to work, so she didn't seem to be picking up her phone. Later on, another motorist found Diane's phone on the side of the highway, and that seems to be the reason why she was not answering her phone at that point in time. So after speaking to her brother Warren, I would assume that Diane kind of hung up the phone, but she laid the phone on the side of the road and got back into the minivan. She began to drive, even though she had just claimed that she felt off and that something was wrong. At 1:33, calls began to flood into 911. At first, several people saw a red minivan take an exit ramp the wrong way onto the Taconic State Parkway, which is near Pleasantville, New York. The exit ramp that Diane took the wrong way was clearly marked with one-way and do not enter signs. Diane ended up driving southbound in the northbound lanes of the Taconic State Parkway. After Diane entered the parkway going the wrong direction, husband